Welcome back, Deep Divers. Today, we're going to explore how the places we live, work, and play actually shape who we are.
And how we shape them right back.
It's all about environmental psychology.
Which, yeah, might sound kind of academic.
But trust me, it gets super interesting.
Yeah.
You've given me a stack of academic papers and textbook excerpts.
Ooh, nice. We're going deep.
So get ready to find out how stuff like, personal space.
Oh, yeah, that invisible bubble we all have.
Exactly. And how city life affects us. Or even, how the color of your walls could be impacting your mood.
Even your health. And then we'll flip it and see how understanding all this can help us design better spaces for everyone.
Spaces that are healthier, more fulfilling.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Let's dive in.
So first things first, what is environmental psychology? Give us a clear definition.
Okay, so at its core, it's the study of how people and their environments, all kinds of environments, are constantly affecting each other.
Okay, so it's a two-way street.
Exactly. It's not just about us reacting to our surroundings.
It's about us changing those surroundings too.
Right. Think about how you rearrange your furniture to make a room feel more you.
Or how a city changes over time as people move in and out and bring their ideas with them.
It's that constant back and forth. We shape our spaces, and then those spaces shape us right back.
I like that. So it's not just appreciating a nice view.
Yeah.
It's about this deeper interplay.
Totally. And that interplay can have some pretty surprising effects.
Well, that's what we're here to uncover, right?
Yeah.
What are some of the big areas of research that environmental psychologists are exploring, based on what you've been reading?
Well, the material covers a lot, but some major themes definitely jump out.
All
right, so we've got personal space, like you mentioned before.
My favorite.
Territoriality, which gets into how we claim and defend our spaces.
Ooh, like putting up a keep out sign.
Sort of. But it can be more subtle than that, too. Then there's crowding.
Ugh, don't get me started on crowded subway.
I know, right? But it's actually more complex than just the number of people in a space.
Really? How so?
Well, think about it. You could be in a crowded concert and feel totally fine, but then get claustrophobic with just one other person in a tense situation.
True, it's not just about physical space.
Right, it's how you feel in that space. And then there's how people experience urban environments.
The cities, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Exactly. All that and more. And we can't forget the restorative power of nature.
Yes. A little nature therapy.
There's actually a ton of research on that, showing how being in nature, or even just looking at it, can really boost our well-being.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack here. Why don't we start with something everyone can relate to? Personal space. We all have that invisible bubble, right? What have researchers actually discovered about it?
Yeah, we do, and it's way more fascinating than you might think. So researchers have found that the size of our personal space bubble can actually change.
What? It's not a fixed thing.
Nope. It depends on things like, well, gender, your cultural background.
Makes sense. Different cultures have different norms.
And even the situation you're in. Picture yourself crammed into a packed elevator.
Oh, I'd be squished right up against strangers.
You're probably more okay with that closeness there than you would be, say, in a mostly empty room.
Totally. Our personal space needs adjust, I guess. Are there any studies that show this, really clearly?
There's this one that comes to mind, figure 18.3 from the Gifford source. It actually shows average personal space distances for North American university students.
Oh, wow. Specific.
Yeah, and what's interesting is they measured how much space people kept when approached from different directions, front, back, the sides.
Interesting. So, someone walking directly at you versus coming up beside you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Turns out people tend to have a much bigger space buffer in front of them than behind them.
So someone walking right at you would feel more intrusive
It's more confrontational.
than someone kind of sidling up next to you.
Yeah, that's the idea. Entering that front space is more of a direct challenge.
Interesting. So we've got this invisible bubble around us, and it's bigger in the front. How does that then connect to the idea of territoriality?
Well, if personal space is like our immediate bubble, then territoriality seems more about claiming and defending bigger spaces.
You got it. It's about those spaces we consider ours, whether it's our home, our office, even our favorite spot in a coffee shop.
So my desk at work, I've got it arranged just so, with my plants and pictures. Definitely my territory.
Perfect example. And it goes beyond just our stuff. It's about personalization.
Making it feel like ours.
Right. And marking our territory, even if it's not with a literal fence.
Like how you decorate your home, that sends a message. This is my space.
Exactly. And architects actually used this understanding of territoriality when they designed buildings.
Oh, really? Tell me more about that.
They try to incorporate elements that give people a sense of control over their own little piece of the building.
To make them feel more at home. Right. For example, they might design apartment buildings with balconies or entryways that residents can personalize. That way, it doesn't just feel like a generic box.
It feels more like their space. I like that. So we've got personal space, we've got territoriality. What about crowding? Is it really more than just how many people are packed into a space?
It totally is. Think of it this way. Crowding is more about how you perceive a situation than about the actual density of people.
Okay, so my experience matters more than the raw numbers.
Right. Think about it. You might feel totally fine in a packed concert surrounded by tons of people,
Love a good concert crowd.
but then feel super crowded and anxious with just one other person if the situation is tense or uncomfortable.
Ooh, yeah, like being stuck in a tiny elevator with someone who's like giving you the side eye.
Exactly. The context makes a huge difference.
So crowding is about how you feel, not just the number of bodies in a room. What are some of those feelings that researchers have identified?
Well, they talk about 3 different modes of crowding. First, there's situational crowding, which is about feeling physically constrained, like you literally can't move freely.
I hate that feeling.
Then there's emotional crowding, which is those negative feelings that can bubble up in a crowded situation.
Like anxiety, irritability, that sort of thing.
Exactly. And finally, there's behavioral crowding, which is all about how being crowded affects your actions.
So like if you leave a party early because you're feeling overwhelmed by all the people.
Exactly. Or maybe you avoid going to crowded places altogether.
Makes sense. It really shows how much our perception and our feelings play a role in how we experience crowded spaces. And this understanding, I imagine, can then be used to design spaces that are less likely to trigger those negative feelings.
Exactly. That's the power of environmental psychology, right?
Yeah.
We can use this knowledge to make better spaces, for instance. Knowing about situational crowding might mean designing spaces with wider hallways or, more open areas so people don't feel so trapped.
Makes sense. Give people some breathing room.
Right. Whereas if we're thinking about emotional crowding, maybe you incorporate more private nooks or give people ways to control their own little space, even in a busy environment.
So it's not just about cramming as many people in as possible. It's about making sure they feel comfortable and, I don't know, not overwhelmed, even if it's bustling.
Exactly. It's all about that balance.
And speaking of balance, this makes me think about urban environments. Cities are this constant push and pull between density and livability, right? What does the research say about the psychological pros and cons of city life?
Cities are fascinating, like from a psych perspective. They're full of contradictions.
Oh, so?
Well, they're super stimulating, tons of stuff going on, opportunities galore.
Yeah, you got culture, jobs, everything's accessible.
Yeah.
But it comes at a cost, right?
For sure. All that noise, traffic, crowds, it can be a lot. Plus, often pollution, and all that contributes to stress, impacts our well-being.
Yeah, it's that sensory overload thing. I love the energy of cities, but after a while, I definitely need a break.
It's understandable. It's kind of like, think about it, humans haven't lived in such dense populations for that long, evolutionarily speaking.
So cities are kind of an unnatural environment for us.
In a way, yeah. We're not really wired for it.
So what keeps drawing us in then? If they're so stressful, why do people flock to cities?
Because they offer this unique kind of stimulation. It's hard to find that buzz anywhere else. Cities are hubs of creativity, innovation.
And you've got world-class museums, theaters, restaurants.
Yeah.
It's nonstop.
Yeah, and that energy, that excitement can be addictive. Plus, cities often have better public transit, so you're less reliant on cars.
Which is a big plus for sustainability. Okay, I'm ready for a change of pace now. Let's talk about nature, the restorative power of nature. You mentioned there's research that backs up that feeling of peace and relaxation many of us get when we're outdoors. Tell us more about that.
There's actually tons of research on this, and it's not just a feeling. Nature really does act like a restorative agent.
Like it literally heals us.
In a way, yeah. Studies show it gives us what's called a cognitive freedom. Our minds can wander, de-stress. It's an escape from the everyday grind.
It's like hitting the reset button.
Exactly. And it can even help us feel more connected to something bigger than ourselves, like we're part of this whole ecosystem.
Makes you feel kind of grounded.
Totally. And the cool thing is, you don't even have to be in nature to get the benefits. Just looking at it can help.
Really? So like having a window with a view of trees.
Yep. Or even just looking at pictures of nature has been shown to have a positive impact.
So I don't need to go on some week-long wilderness trek to feel better.
Nope. Although there's some debate about whether we get the same benefit from city features that mimic nature or if there's something special about the real deal.
Like, is a city park as good as being in a forest?
That's what researchers are trying to figure out. It's an ongoing discussion.
Interesting. Okay, shifting gears a bit. Let's talk about pro-environmental behavior. This is where environmental psychology can help us understand why people make the choices they do, especially when it comes to protecting the environment. And more importantly, how to encourage more people to make sustainable choices.
This is such a crucial area, right? Because we got to figure out how to get folks on board with protecting the planet.
For sure. So what insights does the research give us? What makes people act in eco-friendly ways or not?
Well, there's this key theory called the theory of planned behavior.
Okay, break that down for me.
Basically, it says that when we're deciding whether or not to do something, we weigh the costs and benefits, obviously, but we also factor in what other people are doing and whether we believe we can actually make a difference.
So it's not just about knowing what's good for the environment. It's also about, can I actually do this? And do I see other people doing it?
Exactly. There's the social aspect to it.
Makes sense. Peer pressure could be a powerful thing, for good or bad.
Right. And there's another element that's really interesting, moral and normative concerns.
What does that mean?
It means that our values play a big role. Like if you're driven by altruism, wanting to help others, or you have strong biospheric values.
Hold on, biospheric values.
What are those? Basically, it means you care about the well-being of all living things, not just humans.
Okay, so like a deep respect for all life on Earth.
Exactly. And people with these kinds of values are more likely to make pro-environmental choices, even if those choices are inconvenient or expensive.
So even if it's tough, they'll do it for the greater good.
That's the idea. Their values are guiding them.
I can see that. Are there any other theories that help explain this?
Definitely. Goal framing theory is another one. It suggests that the way we frame our goals can influence our actions.
Can you give an example?
Sure, like let's say you're trying to get people to use public transit more. If you frame it as a way to avoid traffic and save money, appealing to those personal benefits, people might be more likely to do it than if you just focus on the environmental benefits.
So it's about highlighting those positive outcomes, like feeling good about yourself or saving money.
Exactly. It's about finding the right angle. And then there's another important concept called social dilemmas.
Social dilemmas.
Intrigued.
It's all about situations where what's good for the individual in the short term clashes with what's good for the group or the environment in the long term.
Okay, classic example.
Driving your car versus taking public transport. Driving is usually more convenient for you as an individual, right?
For sure. Door-to-door service.
But if everyone drives, we get traffic jams, air pollution, everyone loses in the end.
Ah, the tragedy of the commons. We're all acting selfishly, and it backfires on us.
Exactly. So the big question is, how do we bridge that gap between individual behavior and what's good for everyone in the long run?
Million-dollar question. Any answers from environmental psychology?
Well, research points to two main approaches. First, there's using what we call structural approaches. Think rewards and punishments.
So like tax breaks for eco-friendly choices or fines for polluting. Exactly. Incentives can be powerful. But then there's the other approach, which is about making pro-environmental behaviors easier and more appealing than the alternatives.
So make it convenient and desirable. Sounds like a winning combo.
Right. Like, imagine if public transportation was super reliable, comfortable, and affordable. People would be more likely to ditch their cars.
For sure. Or if recycling was super easy and accessible.
Exactly. Or if energy-efficient products were just, like, the default option. It's about making those sustainable choices the path of least resistance.
I like that. Make it easy to do the right thing. Okay, this is all great in theory, but I want to see how it plays out in the real world. Do we have any case studies that show how environmental psychology is being applied?
Definitely. Tons of cool examples. Let's start with school design. You might not think interior design has a big impact on learning, but it totally does.
Really? Tell me more.
So research shows that even simple things like temporary walls in classrooms can increase distractions for students.
Interesting. So an open classroom isn't always better.
Not necessarily. And there's this cool finding that matching wall design to the way students naturally look around the room can actually improve their focus.
So like if their eyes tend to drift towards a certain spot, you put something engaging there.
Exactly. You're working with their natural tendencies.
That's clever. I wish my school had been designed with that in mind. What about noise? Isn't that a big problem in classrooms?
Huge problem. Noise can really disrupt learning, both while it's happening and even afterwards.
So even after it's quiet again, the effects linger.
Yeah, it can be tough for kids to refocus. Some teachers have even gotten really creative with managing noise levels.
Oh, how so?
They've used behavior modification techniques, like having a sound-activated relay that controls things like music or extra recess time.
Wait, so if the class is too loud, they lose out on those perks?
Exactly. It makes the kids more aware of their own noise levels and gives them an incentive to quiet down.
That's brilliant. Okay, what about lighting? Does it matter if it's fluorescent versus natural light?
That's a good question. There's still research going on about the effects of different lighting types, but some findings suggest that light can affect certain types of performance, like on cognitive tasks or even physical activity.
Interesting. So maybe dimmer lighting for more chill activities and brighter lighting for, like, gym class?
Potentially.
Hmm.
But there's still a lot to learn about how it all works. The big takeaway here is that the physical environment of a school can really impact how well students learn.
It's kind of mind-blowing, right? Like,
Mm.
the design of a school building could be hindering or helping kids learn without anyone even realizing it.
It's definitely something to think about. Okay, let's move on to the workplace. Most of us spend a huge chunk of our lives at work, so the design of those spaces really matters.
Tell me about it. 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, it adds up.
Right. So office design can have a big impact on both how productive we are and how happy we are. One issue that's been getting a lot of attention lately is open plan offices.
Ugh, I have mixed feelings about those.
Yeah, they can be great for collaboration, but the noise can be a real killer. Tell me about it. I feel like I can never concentrate when I'm surrounded by all those conversations and phone calls.
It's a major complaint. And there's research to back it up. Noise distractions can really mess with our focus and productivity. On the plus side, having access to natural light and views of nature has been shown to be super important for well-being at work.
I can definitely see that. A little bit of greenery can go a long way.
Totally. And on the flip side, poor air quality, especially when people feel like they can't control it, can really bring down their mood and their performance.
Yeah, stuffy air is the worst. Makes you feel sluggish.
Exactly. And it's not just about physical comfort. It's about that sense of control over your environment. Feeling powerless can be really stressful.
Makes sense. Okay, how about transportation? How is environmental psychology being used to nudge people towards more sustainable commuting options?
Great question. So researchers have actually created profiles of your typical car user versus your typical public transit user.
Like psychological profiles?
Yep. They look at demographics, values, lifestyle choices, all sorts of stuff, so they can figure out what makes each group tick.
Right. The goal is to use that information to design transit systems that actually meet people's needs and make them a more appealing alternative to driving alone.
Make public transportation the more desirable choice, not just the greener choice.
Exactly. And there's this fascinating area of research that delves into the psychology of what some call car addiction.
Wait, car addiction. Tell me more.
It's about understanding why some people are so attached to their cars, like resistant to even considering other modes of transport.
Yeah, I can see that. Cars offer a sense of freedom, independence. It can be hard to give that up.
Totally. But by understanding the psychology behind it, researchers and city planners can come up with better strategies to at least get people to reconsider their reliance on cars.
Like maybe appealing to their sense of adventure. Try something new. Break free from the traffic jam.
Exactly. Appeal to those underlying motivations.
Okay, this is all so interesting. It really shows how our surroundings, whether it's our classroom, our office, or even how we get to work, can shape our experiences and choices. But before we wrap up, I'm curious about one last area: leisure and travel. How does environmental psychology fit into that?
It helps us understand things like our fascination with travel, for starters. Researchers have actually identified 3 distinct psychological stages of travel.
Oh, lay 'em on me.
Okay, so there's anticipation, the trip itself, and then recollection.
So it's not just about the destination. It's the entire experience, from dreaming to remembering.
You got it. Each stage has its own psychological impact. Anticipation, the planning and excitement can actually boost your mood and well-being even before you go anywhere.
Like just thinking about a trip can make you happier.
Exactly. And then, of course, the trip itself gives you new experiences, a break from routine, often chances to connect with nature and different cultures. And then afterwards, there's the afterglow effect. Even when you're back home, those memories and photos can bring back positive feelings.
Ah, the nostalgia trip.
Right. Exactly. It's all part of what makes travel so appealing to us. But environmental psychology also helps us understand how we choose our travel destinations and this thing called environment shock.
Okay, environment shock. Sounds kind of ominous.
It's It's not always bad, but it's that feeling of disorientation you can get when you travel to a place drastically different from your home environment. Could be culture shock, climate shock, or just that feeling of being overwhelmed by unfamiliar surroundings.
I've definitely felt that before, traveling to places where, like, the customs are totally different and you're not sure what to expect.
It's a common experience, and knowing about it can help people prepare a little better, maybe ease the transition. And then, last but not least, environmental psychology also looks at the impact of tourism on natural environments.
Yeah, that's huge, right? Tourism can be great for local economies, but can also put a lot of strain on natural resources and ecosystems if it's not done responsibly.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance. So, as you can see, environmental psychology touches on so many aspects of our lives, from our daily routines to our leisure activities.
It's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it. And it seems like the field itself is always evolving. Where do you see environmental psychology heading in the future? What are the big trends?
There are a few that I'm particularly excited about. One is a shift away from focusing on needs as defined by, experts or authorities and moving towards more of a rights-based approach.
So instead of saying this is what people need, it's more about empowering communities to define their own needs and having more control over how those needs are met.
Exactly. Recognizing that different communities have different priorities, different values, and making sure those are front and center when we're designing and managing their environments. And another big focus is on well-being in our increasingly diverse cities.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Cities are becoming more global, and we need to make sure that the spaces we create work for everyone, not just a narrow slice of the population.
Absolutely. Environmental psychology can help us understand those culturally specific needs. What works for one group might not work for another. It's about fostering that sense of belonging, of well-being for all
It's
residents.
about challenging those assumptions, right? The ones we often make based on a single dominant cultural model,
Right.
embracing the richness of different perspectives.
Exactly. And of course, looming over all of this, we've got globalization and sustainability as two of the biggest challenges facing us today. And environmental psychology is right there in the thick of it.
It seems like this field is absolutely crucial for figuring out how to encourage pro-environmental behavior on a global scale, especially given the complexity of navigating cultural differences.
It really is. We need to be sensitive to those nuances, encourage long-term thinking, and this is the tricky part, find ways to actually implement what we know from research. There's often this gap between knowledge and action.
So it's not just about studying the problems, it's about translating that knowledge into real-world solutions.
Exactly. That's the ultimate goal, right? To make a positive impact.
Well, this has been an incredibly eye-opening deep dive into environmental psychology. I'm definitely looking at my surroundings with fresh eyes now. If there was one key takeaway you'd want our listeners to walk away with today, what would it be?
I'd say the most important thing is to pay attention to how your environment makes you feel. As you go about your day, really notice what spaces give you energy, what spaces drain you.
It's about becoming more aware, more mindful of our surroundings.
Exactly. Once you start tuning into that, you can ask yourself, what small changes could I make to improve my well-being in these spaces? Maybe add some plants to your office, open the blinds to let in more natural light, or take a few minutes to just be in nature, even if it's just a park.
Those are great suggestions. And totally doable. I'm already feeling inspired to make some changes.
That's what it's all about. Environmental psychology reminds us that we do have the power to shape our spaces. And in doing so, we can support not only our own needs, but also contribute to a healthier, more sustainable future for everyone.
This has been a fantastic deep dive into environmental psychology. I feel like we've only just scratched the surface, though. There's clearly so much more to learn.
There is. It's a truly fascinating field, full of insights that can help us all create positive change.
A huge thanks to our expert for guiding us through this. And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this journey of discovery. We've only just begun to dive deep, but hopefully this sparks some curiosity to keep exploring. Until next time.
There are a few that I'm particularly excited about. One is this shift away from focusing on needs as defined by, experts or authorities and moving toward more of a rights-based approach.
Okay, so instead of saying this is what people need, it's more about empowering communities to define their own needs.
Yeah.
And having more control over, like, how those needs are met.
Exactly. Recognizing that different communities have different priorities, different values, and making sure those are front and center when we're designing and managing their environments.
Makes sense. So
And-
it's less top-down, more collaborative.
Right. And another big focus is on well-being in our increasingly diverse cities.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cities are becoming more and more global,
Yeah.
and we need to make sure that the spaces we create work for everyone, not just, a narrow slice of the population.
Absolutely. Environmental psychology can help us understand those culturally specific needs. What works for one group might not work for another. It's about fostering that sense of belonging, of well-being for all
It's
residents.
about challenging those assumptions, right? The ones we often make based on a single dominant cultural model.
Yeah,
Embrace the richness of different perspectives.
exactly. And of course, looming over all of this, we've got globalization and sustainability as two of the biggest challenges facing us today. And environmental psychology is right there in the thick of it.
Yeah, it seems like this field is absolutely crucial for figuring out how to encourage pro-environmental behavior on a global scale, especially with all the complexities of cultural differences.
It really is. We need to be sensitive to those nuances, encourage long-term thinking. And this is the tricky part, find ways to actually implement what we know from research. There's often this gap between knowledge and action.
Right. It's one thing to study the problems, but it's another thing entirely to put those solutions into practice in the real world.
Exactly. That's the ultimate goal, right? To make a positive impact.
Well, this has been an incredibly eye-opening deep dive into environmental psychology. I'm already looking at my surroundings with fresh eyes. What's the key takeaway you'd want our listeners to walk away with today?
Pay attention to how your environment makes you feel.
Yeah.
As you go about your day, really notice what spaces give you energy, what spaces drain you.
It's like becoming more aware, more mindful of our surroundings.
Exactly. Once you start tuning into that, you can ask yourself, what small changes could I make to improve my well-being in these spaces? Maybe add some plants to your office, open the blinds to let in more natural light, or take a few minutes to just be in nature, even if it's just a park.
I love those suggestions. Simple, but powerful. I'm already feeling inspired to make some changes.
That's what it's all about. Environmental psychology reminds us that we do have the power to shape our spaces. And in doing so, we can support not only our own needs, but also contribute to a healthier, more sustainable future for everyone.
This has been a fantastic deep dive into environmental psychology.
Yeah.
I feel like we've only scratched the surface, though. There's so much more to explore.
There is. It's a fascinating field full of insights that can help us all create positive change.
Huge thanks to you, our expert, for guiding us through this. And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this journey of discovery. We've only just begun to dive deep, but hopefully this sparks some curiosity to keep exploring. Until next time.